Hello, good morning, and welcome to Politics at Jack and Sam's Daily, the podcast which gives you everything you need to know about the day ahead in under 20 minutes.
Hello there, my name is Sam Coates of Sky News, and with me is Jack Blanchard of Politico. It's Tuesday, September the 24th. And for the first time, we're both on the road. We're both together at Labour Party conference. Well, I ought to say not together. We're very much in separate hotel rooms in different parts of Liverpool. Jack, this is the first time that we've been able to compare and contrast different hotel rooms. You've got a red velvet curtain behind you. So who gets the better hotel rooms, Politico or Sky?
My clever money is on Sky, I think. I hear the real money is in TV. Yeah, my hotel room sort of got... If you ever saw Twin Peaks and the Red Lodge, but it's got that sort of surreal red vibe about it. But, you know, it's doing me okay. It's given me at least 4 hours good sleep last night, so you can't ask for more than that at a conference, can you, Sam?
No, the big problem with this place is that we've run out of coffee already, so that's a big black mark. Anyway, we don't want reviews of hotel rooms, we want reviews of this podcast. Please do log on to the various podcast apps, give us a review, let us know what you think, leave some tips and feedback, and get in touch if you've got anything that you wanted to talk about. Anyway, on with today. Jack, what's coming up?
The big thing today, obviously, Sam, is Keir Starmer's speech at party conference, which is happening at 2 o'clock this afternoon. It was the talk of all the conference parties last night that I was at. I'm sure you were at as well. Evenings at conference are completely dominated by these weird drinks events that you sort of go from one to another and you see the same collections of people at each of them, and occasionally someone unexpected pops up at one. But everyone was talking about what they wanted to hear from Keir Starmer today, what they were hoping to hear from Keir Starmer today, and also what they thought of Rachel Reeves yesterday. I thought the mood in the party is... It's not dire here. It's not quite as bad as people are making out. I think the weather, which has been absolutely atrocious yesterday. I mean, it really like biblical levels of downpour. I mean, we've obviously seen actually very serious flooding in parts of the country. It hasn't quite been that bad in Liverpool, but it felt like it at times. Has definitely put a dampener on the mood. It's hard to be in party mode when it is literally raining cats and dogs outside. But it's definitely a lot flatter than you might have expected it to be with Labour back in power, as everyone has been saying. And I think Rachel Reeves did okay yesterday, and certainly nobody was complaining about her speech. And I suspect that'll be similar with Keir Starmer today. He's not exactly a guy to set the world on fire with his public speaking, but, you know, you'd imagine he'll do enough to keep people happy.
We know a bit about what he's going to say. He is going to promise to build a new Britain, to say that tough decisions he's taking for the short term are the first step on a journey of national renewal. He is continuing, whilst injecting some optimism, to lay it on thick with what he says is a shared struggle and tough decisions in the short term, all for the gain in the long term. So it's not all sunny uplands today. There's a lot of doubling down, defence of the difficult decisions like winter fuel allowance that they've already had. And it doesn't sound like there is a huge amount of spending as part of this speech. He instead is looking to rouse the troops. There's a bit of Gordon Brownery. If you remember in Gordon Brown's last conference speech, he did a great long list of all the things that he was proud of. Well, Keir Starmer will do that after barely 10 weeks. He'll list planning and solar projects and wind projects and ending MPs' second jobs and border security command. He's going to try and get them going in the hall, a bit like Rachel Reeves tried to do yesterday. So we'll see whether that works on the mood. But I think that the hope will be that this speech does steady the ship. I thought that Saturday and Sunday at Labour conference were a little bit more wobbly, but Rachel Reeves' speech yesterday really sort of did steady the mood a bit. There was a big grown-up piece of political theatre from one of this government's big beasts, and it was delivered in a way that I think impressed the audience, even if there wasn't a kind of wow factor announcement that got the crowd going.
The lack of wow factor announcements continues to amaze me a little bit, though. I have to say, I do remember attending conferences I guess when David Cameron was Prime Minister, and there would always be a sort of series of announcements. You remember it, Sam, that they would plan through the conference, make sure there was a different story every day, different things briefed to different papers. Then they'd drop this big story in the speech, and the Downing Street operation would control the narrative of what was being reported, and there is not really a big attempt to do that here. You'll see tidbits from Starmer's speech with small policy announcements dotted around the papers this morning. The Times has got something about a crackdown on welfare fraudsters. The Mirror gets the timetable for the new Hillsborough laws that we've already known the government was going to do. The Sun's got something about a clampdown on businesses flouting visa rules. They're all kind of small-scale, interesting stuff, but none of them are a big-ticket announcement designed to change the narrative and change the mood around the current government, and we didn't hear that from Rachel Reeves yesterday either. And so it would seem that this Downing Street operation is content to let the media drive the narrative, and that I consider to be a slightly dangerous thing to do when you face a fairly hostile media, as any Labour government tends to do.
And this Downing Street has been on the defensive, I think, a bit this week. If you speak to some of them, they complain that there simply aren't enough of them trying to work with the media, craft a message. That quite a lot of people put that down to Sue Gray's attempt to stop enough special advisors being appointed. I'm sure she would deny that, but she's obviously not here in Liverpool. But there is, I think there is a recognition from top to bottom in the party that even though things have steadied a bit, there probably needs to be some kind of reset inside government about the way Number 10 works, whether that's the political operation or the communications operation. After conference, talking to cabinet ministers last night, they certainly hope that Keir Starmer gets a bit more of a grip. There's a sense he'll probably take a little bit of time to do that because he won't want to be seen to be bounced into stuff and to carefully sort of mull and weigh up what he'd do. I certainly had one member of the Labour Party saying Sue Gray will be gone within a month. I find that hard to believe, but it is there is a sort of unified belief that something's got to change in Number 10. And change kind of pretty swiftly after the last 3 days.
We are told that Keir Starmer will be up on stage at 2:00 this afternoon. I gather his speech will be about 45 minutes long. He was rehearsing it late last night. Somebody's just told me that he was having dinner last night with Jamie Carragher, the Liverpool footballer in the Pullman. Sam, you won't know who that is, but he's a famous Liverpudlian, but very much not a player for Arsenal, Keir Starmer's team. So, that's an interesting way to prepare for a conference speech, if that's true.
But I think it is true to say, Jack, that despite the lack of headline announcements, if you put together today's extract so far of Keir Starmer's speech and yesterday's speech by Rachel Reeves, I feel like I've learned quite a lot on the economic policy of this government in the last 36 hours that I didn't know. I mean, there's the odd clue in the speech. Today, he, as I was saying, doubles down on some of the tough language. He also says, and I thought this is interesting, that working people want good public services, but their pockets are not deep, not at all. So that sounds like they will be careful about keeping an eye out on anything that might increase the cost of living, aside from the taxes that they've promised not to put up. But I think that there is a big sense over the last couple of days of a major shift in the way the government is approaching the budget on October the 30th. Let me explain. I think there's been a shift between before the summer and now. Now, before the summer, Rachel Reeves announced her 22 billion black hole. And she was very clear there were going to be tough decisions to fill that 22 billion, like the winter fuel allowance that's caused all the problems, including at this conference where there'll be a vote likely tomorrow. And at that point, it sounded like whether it was spending cuts or welfare, cutting welfare, or tax rises, or getting rid of capital projects that fund investment, really difficult decisions were on the table. What has started to emerge yesterday in the speech, and from talking to people, is that I think they've realised that the toughest possible course is just politically unwise in a way that they didn't know back in July. So I think there are two things. In Rachel Reeves' speech yesterday, she was very clear that low investment feeds decline. She was very clear that you are going to have to invest in things. In other words, back in July, she was more than happy to cancel capital projects, road projects, hospital projects. But in her speech yesterday, it sounds like she's less keen to do that. And that even though the Treasury might want to slash some sort of spending on projects, because that's a good way of filling a black hole, ministers are now much more wary about that. And that tallies with conversations I was having with cabinet ministers last night. And that links to the second thing, which is I think there is now just a much bigger appetite to do whatever they can to borrow a bit more. Now, we've talked before about changing the fiscal rules in order to change the definition of debt and in order to allow them to borrow a bit more on that. I'm also told, and we did this on Sky last night, that some of the £22 billion black hole may not only be filled by spending cuts and tax rises and welfare cuts, but also some of that may end up being filled by borrowing as well. Some of the £22 billion black hole may be put on the government's collective credit card, which I have to say is a surprise to me. But I think there has been just that shift in attitude. If the fiscal rules can allow it, I was cautioned that the first fiscal rule about balancing the current budget makes that quite hard. But I am absolutely confident that at the moment they are looking at borrowing to fill the £22 billion black hole, which didn't feel like it was on the agenda just a month ago.
I was chatting to an economist about this a few weeks ago who was telling me that there are ways and different ways that you can calculate the size of the debt, and there are things that you can do and change the way things are described that can suddenly open up new amounts of so-called headroom when chancellors need to do it. And sure enough, there's an interesting article in The Guardian this morning which says that Rachel Reeves is weighing up some of these options, excluding losses for the Treasury on the Bank of England, winding down its crisis-era quantitative easing bond buying programme, something that is not top of the public's priority list, but which they say could suddenly open up headroom in the public finances worth £15 billion. And similarly, if you move off some of the new institutions that Labour is planning to create, or in the process of creating, the National Wealth Fund, GB Energy, you take them off the government's books, ta-da, another £15 billion of headroom is created for borrowing. Nobody really, like I said, nobody out in the real world remotely understands how this stuff works or what it means or what the consequences are. But if Rachel Reeves can pull off some of those sorts of, semi-accounting tricks to make things a little easier for her on October 30th, then you can believe that given the way it's gone so far, that's the sort of thing that the government might consider.
And one of the ways that the government will deal with this is, the great danger of this, of course, is that the markets end up thinking that the government's borrowing too much and that costs of borrowing might start to rise, which might all look a little bit Liz Trussian. So what the government are doing is they're making sure they sound very, very responsible. So even as perhaps Rachel Reeves starts to loosen sort of economic policy and allow a bit more borrowing, she'll probably double down on the rhetoric of being a tough and responsible chancellor just to reassure the markets as she plans to chart a course to borrow a bit more. Shall we look at some of the other things that are going on today, Jack?
Well, I mean, it is really the Keir Starmer show. It has to be said, Sam. But yes, there are a procession of other ministers who will be out and about on the conference stage and speaking at fringes today. Of course, the Cabinet Office Minister Pat McFadden has got the morning broadcast round. Yvette Cooper will be first on stage today. She's talking about street crime. And so on. I would think they're the two that people are most interested in. There's a bit of Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, a bit of the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. But I sort of feel like, poor old Shabana Mahmood, if you get the slot after the leader's speech, then you really are sort of in the depths of nobody really listening to what's going on, because they do just tend to crowd everything else out, don't they?
And in an unusual quirk, which I haven't seen, I think, since Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, Keir Starmer is going to leave his own conference today. After he's done his speech, after he's done a couple of interviews, pre-recorded interviews for the morning, he's going to head to New York to the UN General Assembly in order to address that. And it'll be there that he does his sort of end of conference interviews, main set of interviews, rather than here in Liverpool. Now, the backdrop to this conference, of course, is what's going on in the Middle East. You've had the Hezbollah airstrikes, which the Lebanese say has killed 492 people, while comments from Israel's defense minister suggests that the Israeli military is preparing for a longer conflict. So there is a massive global story. David Lammy already at UNGA and Keir Starmer joining them tonight, it is possible that Keir Starmer's speech, depending on what happens today, isn't even the top of the news if there's no clear news line because of what's happening elsewhere.
Yeah, and just as the Middle East crisis completely overshadowed Labour conference last year, as you say, there is a risk that the same thing is happening now, and you suspect that, by the end of this week, that could be the main thing we're talking about on this podcast, rather than, who's gossiping with who at certain Labour parties and who's drinking with who, and which cabinet minister got the most faces on the cupcakes at this party and so on. This all rather overshadows the whole thing. And David Lammy speaking at the UN this afternoon. Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London's over there. He'll be speaking there today as well. Keir Starmer's speech is scheduled for later in the week.
We should wrap it up there, because I think that pretty much takes us through everything that's coming today. We will speak to you tomorrow with the last instalment from Labour Party conference.
Can't wait to get home. All right. Cheers, Sam. See you soon.
See you then. Cheers.